Hello everyone and welcome back to another Wizard101 video. Today I am going to be doing kind of the flip side of a video I did the other day. I did the most useless spells in every school's arsenal and how to fix them. Today I want to do kind of the flip side of that. I want to do the most broken spells in every school's arsenal. So the most overpowered BS spells. Now I want to say two things before you go into this video, and if I get any comments on either of these things that are like genuine, legitimate complaining about it, I am going to like smash you into the ground with an atomic elbow, alright? First off, this is not PvP. For PvP, it is vastly different for literally every school, and I know that. So if you're coming into this expecting to see certain PvP spells, or just taking into account PvP at all, that is just blatantly not what this list is. That's not what this is. So that's that. Second, I want to try drawing from different aspects of the game. I'm gonna try to not do the obvious for all of them, because obviously, like, you know, I could say 4-pip AoE, I could say 7-pip AoE for all of them, because that's the spells we use the most in the game. But I'm gonna try to draw from different spells and different kind of areas of the game to make it a more balanced list and a more comprehensive list. So without further ado, let's get into it. I'm gonna try to justify all of these as best as possible. So starting off, let's go with fire. Now, fire is one that I actually kind of struggled with, because I was like, what can I say is overpowered? Because I wouldn't consider like Fire Dragon or Meteor Strike to be overpowered. And then I thought of a strategy that I haven't seen used in a while, but is actually insanely good. And you may see here, it is the Scald strategy. Now, a lot of people probably actually don't know about this, but it is a strategy that was released a while ago. I'll try to find the video that I saw the strategy in and leave it in the description below. So if you want, go click on that and go see what I'm talking about. But basically, there is a strategy in this game that I would consider pretty overpowered, and that is being able to, I believe, one round just about every single boss in the early game to even some of the later game bosses. And if you're wondering exactly what the strategy is, basically what it is you have two fires, one hitter, one not. The hitter will use Scald, and what the non-hitter will do is they need to have the Dahlia Falmea hat from the Professor's Horde pack, which has Mass Detonate. So kind of how it goes is you Mass Blade the one that's using Scald, someone also has to have Mass Feint, and then you use Scald and you use Mass Detonate, and it usually does 20,000 plus damage. That is really crazy. I've seen people use it to 2-round things like Hades, some of the Darkmoor bosses. It is actually a really insane, genuine strategy. And I would say that this is probably not necessarily Scald's fault. I will say it's probably a mixture of just all the spells, but I needed something for fire, and I thought that this was at least an interesting choice, right? Like, it's not what you'd expect for fire for most broken spell. And I will also say, this spell isn't necessarily broken in the most common sense, but if you do think about it, 825 over 3 rounds, and that's just being an AoE attack, is actually really, really good, not gonna lie. So I would say to fix this, maybe, probably just make the strategy a little bit less busted, right? Like, make Mass Detonate a little bit harder to use, or make Scald do slightly less damage, maybe like 400 base or 450 base, something like that. I mean, Scald isn't really a used spell at all besides the strategy, so you don't necessarily need to nerf it. I'm just saying that this is definitely a bit of a broken strategy. So that's it for the first one. I hope that this wasn't like the obvious answer, and it's something that, you know, I just figured I would throw out there. All right, next up we have Ice, and this one's actually extremely challenging because, to be honest, Ice doesn't have that many broken spells in PvE. Ice is really fairly balanced. It has a lot of weak spells that I would say, you know, are bad in PvE, but it doesn't have any overwhelmingly powerful ones. And to be honest, I don't know exactly what to say here. There's a few I could say, there's a few that are definitely more powerful than others, but I genuinely don't think Ice necessarily has an overpowered spell in PvE. I'm not really gonna show anything off, but I do think some of the more powerful spells they have, like Snowball Barrage is definitely really good. The only thing that's bad about it is that Shadow Pip, I would say. Ice Armor can be very good. Honestly, I think it is an underutilized spell in PvE, but I don't think it's overpowered. And I think most of their more powerful spells are just shadow spells, which I would never call a shadow spell overpowered realistically, because the Shadow Pip cost definitely puts a hamper in most of them. I mean, maybe some of them, like obviously there's some more powerful ones that are probably overpowered. Basically, I'm just gonna say ice, I don't really have an answer for. I would just say that some of their better spells are Snowball Barrage, and then maybe a good one that's underutilized is Ice Armor. But I don't think you should nerf either of them. I think both of them are in a pretty good state. So I guess we just gotta move on with ice. All right, well, I can't actually change characters because, as you all know, I do not have any Storm Wizards. So let's talk about Storm, and this one should be incredibly obvious. This one is like literally the most obvious one, and that is Tempest. Tempest is so broken in this game, like so broken in this game that it is ridiculous. And people get annoyed sometimes and they say like, oh, Storms just spam Tempest, but realistically I don't blame them. There's no reason to not spam Tempest because Tempest is really good. 80 per pip and then plus 300 with an enchant, that is an incredible amount of base damage. That means a Storm with Tempest with a single pip, so say they just started with one pip, not a power pip, would do 400 damage. 400 damage is more than a lot of AoEs do generally, and then that's not to mention usually you start with 5, so that's going to be doing like 700 damage at base. That is a lot of damage at base for a first round spell, and realistically, again, I don't blame any Storms for doing it. You can do like thousands of damage with no pips on Tempest, so it's not exactly surprised that they spam it. On top of that, you get it at a very early level. You get it like level 28, I think, or maybe it's the end of Marleybone. It's one of those two milestones. They come basically at the same time, but basically you get that at such an early level that it is just the most useful spell that you can possibly have. Like most other wizards have a problem where 4 pip AoEs are annoying and you can't really use them first round because a lot of times you pip fail. For Storm, it doesn't matter. For Storm, you can use them whenever, and realistically, this again should come as no surprise to anyone. Tempest is just really that good, and in my opinion, there should never be a single case in this game where you don't have a Tempest in your deck. I know some people don't pack it and they're like, oh, I don't need it, but realistically, it will always be good to have that, even if it's just in case. So I would say Tempest for Storm is definitely quite a bit broken. All right, next up is Myth, and for Myth, I'm gonna actually give 2 answers. I'm gonna give one that I do think is legitimately too powerful, and then I'm gonna give one that I think has the potential to be too powerful, but isn't because of game factors. The first one is actually Orthrus. Now, this might come as a surprise to most people, because most people are like, Noah, Orthrus, it's pretty decent as is. Well, yes, but I will say, Orthrus is in a very strange spot right now. Orthrus has the highest base damage out of any 7-pip AoE in this entire game, which is really weird, considering the fact that Myth is not supposed to have that. Like, I think Myth spells based on base damage are supposed to be the 3rd or 4th highest, like behind Storm and behind Fire. And some people have given the reason for this in the past, like I've brought this up. Some people have said, oh, it's because, you know, Fire is an overtime and Storms has a stun. Well, yes, but realistically, stuns don't mean anything, and I definitely think Storm should be higher than Myth in this case. I think that generally Orthrus should have probably around 660 damage, or maybe 650, somewhere in there. Realistically, not 650 because that's below Power Nova. I would put it like above Power Nova, so maybe 670, 680, somewhere in there, which kind of goes in line with most other things. Like Scarecrow is lower because it has the heal back with it at 590, and then you compare it to Frost Giant, like 490 or whatever its base damage is. I think it would fit nicely there. It should definitely be below Storm in my opinion. I just think it's a little bit too strong. I don't really know exactly why they did this. I guess just because it doesn't have any hanging effects, but I don't know. I just personally think it's a bit too strong. And the second thing I want to talk about is something I think that has the potential to be too strong, and it's definitely strong in PvP, I believe, and that is Medusa. Now, this one is strong, obviously, because it has that big base damage, 700 base damage, and then a 2-round stun. This is obviously an amazing spell. I think the reason, though, why I wouldn't call this overpowered is because, obviously, stuns in PvE mean nothing. They don't do anything. So I would definitely say that this is less so, but this, if stunning worked how it should, this spell has the potential to be one of the best spells in this game, in my opinion. Like, it has that hit and then the stall factor, which is just really nice. So I would say that that's it for Myth. That's what I would give anyway, but let me know if you have any other recommendations in the comments below. I'm sure there are some spells people would say, but in regards to PvE, there isn't too many, I would say, that are like necessarily better. So whatever, let's move on. All right, so I've actually mentioned this in the past, and I'm going to bring this up again here, but I think Life has some of the strongest spells in this entire game that are kind of not looked at with the potential that they have. I said this in a video I made on Life a little bit ago, but genuinely, I do think Life is pretty broken. So I'm going to list a few spells that I think are quite a bit stronger than what you would expect from a spell that Life would have in general. So the first one, and I'm going to put this in a broad category, is healing spells. And this one goes for a lot of healing spells because healing spells have an insane amount of healing per pip. For example, Dryad does like, I believe 225 per pip, which is insane. That means at base, you can have a spell that does like 3,000 healing with max pips. That's not even counting for outgoing and incoming. That's like, you could do an insane amount of things with that spell in general. On top of that, you have things like Pigsy and Unicorn. Unicorn's recently been buffed to 460 for 3 pips to all friends. That's a really, really good spell. And then on top of that, Pigsy has Pigsy and then upgrades. Really genuinely just 2 amazing spells. And then, you know, you have stuff like Satyr, which heals 860. You have Rebirth, which heals even more than that for 7 pips. Life just has so many really good spells for healing that I think are bordering on OP. I genuinely think that they probably need to lower the base healing for a few of these spells. Like, I think Satyr would be better at like 750. I think Unicorn is fine. It should just be more like 420, I guess. Dryad maybe should be like 150 per pip instead. Stuff like that. I do genuinely think that healing is a little bit busted in most cases. Like, whenever I have a healer in my fight, like if it's me or my friends and one of us has a healer, that fight is a guaranteed victory with none of us even coming close to dying, just because the healing in this game is legitimately that good. Like, it is realistically one of the best roles that you can have, and I don't think anyone should look down on it. I think it's really, really good. The next spell I'm going to say is one that most people should see coming, and that is Rat Spin. Rat Spin is actually really broken for quite a few reasons. The first off is that it does more base damage than any other 4-pip AoE in this game, which is a little bit nuts, not gonna lie. I don't know why it does, but it does. So Life AoE is really good. You can see 310 to 340, that's better than even Meteor Strike. But that's not all. You can obviously upgrade this spell. If you went through it and had the time to upgrade it, 350 to 380 base damage for a 4-pip spell is really, really good. I think this spell is definitely like bordering on broken. I don't know exactly why they made Rat Spin so powerful. I guess it's because you can't get it normally by very easy means, you know, you need to actually craft it or get the spell-ins for it. But I do genuinely think it's just a little bit busted. So for this one, I would actually recommend like maybe just lowering it down to like 290 to 300 at base, but it's not like overwhelmingly bad, I would say. Next up, we have Death, and never mind the fact that my hat is red for some reason, don't worry about it. Death, I would say, actually has a few that are pretty useful and pretty broken that you can get decently easily. The first one is just a general one, and this goes for all schools, not just Death, and that is Feint. I do genuinely think Feint in this game is really, really broken, especially late game when you can Feint stack. I mean, just think about it. Very, very easily, like if you just have Dragoon Boots, right? You can have base Feint, you can have Enchanted Potent, you can have normal Potent, and then say you had like Mass Feint on your hat, that's an easy 4 feints. And that's not even counting the fact that you can very easily get treasure cards as well. You can Feint stack so easily late game. So I would say this spell is definitely broken. And I would say this one is either fixed by not allowing Feint stacking as easy, maybe. Make it so that like a plus 80 can't stack with a different plus 80, but I don't personally like that. Or just make Feints a little bit weaker. I think if Feint was like 60%, maybe 50%, it would be much better. I just think it's like slightly broken, and this has been the meta now for years. Like Feint meta has been in the game for so long, and I don't think that it's necessarily bad, but it definitely gets a bit stale. So that's the first spell, I would say. The second spell, and this one might come as a surprise to most, is Bad Juju, because Bad Juju is really, really good. Obviously, in a lot of dungeons, like in the Trident battle at the end of Imperia, you almost need someone who's a Juju spammer. But I will say, Juju is just so good. It only costs 300 health, which I think is very, very little, especially late game. I mean, look at my health at 8,300. I could use so many of them, even with my damage and everything and pierce. I still can use the spell quite a few times. And on top of that, it is a minus 90. That's basically 0 damage. Like, if anyone uses that spell, it is going to do basically nothing. Like, if a spell did 10,000 damage, that's only 1,000 remaining. And most spells in this game don't even get close to that. Like, most bosses have cheats that do, like, say, a 4,000 health thing. That 4,000 damage thing will only do, like, 400 with bad juju. It's just so powerful, especially if you have a dedicated juju spammer. And I would say that it's definitely a little bit broken. This one is, like, probably one of the most broken spells on this list. I would say the 2 ways to change it would be to make it do more base health, so maybe, like, 700 damage, which I know is quite a bit, but it should be for something this powerful, or lower the minus 90 to like a minus 80 or a minus 75, something like that, where it's slightly more balanced. Those are the 2 things I would say for bad juju. Realistically, I would say this isn't necessarily the most necessary thing, but it definitely needs a bit of a change in my opinion. All right, finally we have balance, and for this one I have 2 main kind of ideas for what I think is considered a little bit overpowered. The first one, and this goes very much in line with my list so far, is Judgment. I do genuinely think Judgment is kind of broken in this game. 100 damage per pip is actually a pretty crazy damage per pip rating. If you look at it compared to most spells damage per pip, it is quite a bit. And that's not even taking into account the fact that you can then enchant the spell, and that's just really, really good. Like you can see here, this right now would do 600 damage and then plus 300, so that's 900 base damage, and this has only been like 2-3 rounds. It's really just a solid spell, and this is again one spell I'd recommend carrying in most decks, like similar to Tempest. This one, it's more like a boss deck. You definitely want this in almost every boss deck, but it is really, really good. So I would say that that's definitely one that is a little bit broken. For this one, again, I would just lower it by like maybe 10 damage per pip or something like that. And the final one, and this one is one that might be a bit more surprising, is Nested Fury. Now, I don't actually have it on this wizard, so I can't look at the spell, but I'm sure most of you know it. It is the kind of Russian nesting doll. It either does fire, ice, or storm damage, and the reason why this one is really good is because it's actually one of the most powerful AoEs in this entire game. For only 6 pips and a shadow pip, the storm one can potentially do 1,000 damage at base. This is without an enchant yet. The ice one, I believe, does 800, and the fire one 900. So either way, it's a really, really strong and powerful base AoE damage. Like, to put it into perspective, I believe Rage Bull has around 600. Obviously, Stormlord has 690. It is really, really powerful for an AoE attack, and it's just really, really good, I would say. Obviously, it costs a shadow pip, which kind of sucks, but it is probably the strongest base AoE in this game. I think Tempest can overtake it if you have max pips, but obviously max pips is kind of like, who would ever save up for max pips? You know what I'm saying? So I would probably nerf this one by just lowering the base damage of each one by maybe 100, 150, something around there. It's not like a super needed nerf. It's just something that is definitely like, that is a high base damage spell compared to most others balance has and most other people have. But that is really it for today. That is my list of overpowered spells. Hopefully you found something interesting, and let me know what you think is an overpowered spell in the comments below. I am interested to hear what you have to say, but that's what I would consider the main overpowered spells from each school. But that's really it. Again, let me know what you think. But otherwise, thank you all for watching. I will see you in the next video. Adios.